The sun hammered down on Dust Creek like God's own anvil, turning the main street into a ribbon of baked earth and broken dreams. Sheriff Jack Morrison wiped the sweat from his brow and squinted at the figure riding into town on a paint horse that had seen better days. The rider sat tall in the saddle, wearing a wide-brimmed hat pulled low and a duster coat that had more dust than fabric left in it. Jack had been sheriff of this godforsaken town for 5 years, and he knew trouble when he saw it. This rider had trouble written all over them like words in a dime novel. The horse stopped outside the saloon, and the rider dismounted with a fluid grace that made Jack's hand drift toward his pistol without thinking about it. Then the stranger removed their hat, and Jack's world tilted sideways. A cascade of honey-colored hair tumbled down past slender shoulders. The face looking back at him belonged to a woman, and not just any woman. She had eyes the color of whiskey in sunlight, sharp cheekbones that could cut glass, and lips that curved into a smile that promised either salvation or damnation, depending on your point of view. She walked straight toward him, her boots kicking up small clouds of dust with each step. Jack noticed she wore men's trousers beneath that duster, which was scandalous enough to set the town's gossips buzzing for months. But there was something else, something in the way she carried herself that spoke of secrets and danger. "Sheriff," she said, her voice low and smooth as aged bourbon. "I'm looking for someone." "That's what they all say," Jack replied, keeping his tone neutral even as his heart hammered against his ribs like a prisoner trying to escape. "This someone got a name?" "Might have several," she said, her smile widening just a fraction. "But the one I'm interested in goes by Samuel Blackwood. Heard he might be in these parts." Jack felt his blood turn to ice water. Samuel Blackwood was the most wanted man in 3 territories, a killer and a thief who left a trail of bodies and broken hearts wherever he rode. The reward for Blackwood was enough to set a person up for life, which meant this woman was either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish. "You a bounty hunter?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. "Something like that," she said. "Name's Catherine Lane, but most folks just call me Cat." Before Jack could respond, a commotion erupted from the saloon behind her. 3 men stumbled out into the street, clearly drunk despite it being barely noon. They took one look at Cat and started making the kind of comments that would make a preacher blush and a decent man reach for his gun. Cat didn't even turn around. She just sighed, the kind of sigh that said she'd dealt with this particular brand of stupidity 1,000 times before. "I'd suggest you ignore them," Jack said, stepping forward. "They're harmless when they're drunk, which is most of the time." "Harmless," Cat repeated, as if tasting the word. Then she did something that made Jack's jaw drop and his pulse race. In one smooth motion, she unbuckled her gun belt and let it fall to the dust. Then she reached for the buttons of her duster coat. "What in the hell are you doing?" Jack asked, his voice coming out strangled. Cat shrugged off the coat, revealing a simple white shirt beneath, tucked into those scandalous trousers. Then, while maintaining eye contact with Jack, she unbuttoned the trousers and let them drop to her ankles, revealing a pair of fitted breeches underneath, the kind fancy ladies wore for horseback riding in the East. "Sweet Jesus," Jack breathed, unable to stop himself. "Your trouble." Cat kicked off the dusty outer trousers and stood there in her proper riding attire, looking like she belonged in a Philadelphia drawing room rather than a dusty Western street. She bent down, retrieved her gun belt, and strapped it back on with practiced efficiency. "Trouble's my middle name, Sheriff," she said, her eyes glinting with amusement and something darker. "Now, about Samuel Blackwood. We should talk somewhere private. What I have to tell you might just save this town, or it might burn it to the ground. Either way, you'll want to hear it." Jack led Cat through the back door of his office, acutely aware of every eye on the street following their movements. The town of Dust Creek thrived on gossip like a garden thrived on rain, and by sundown, every soul within 10 miles would know about the woman in riding breeches who dropped her trousers in the middle of Main Street. He could already hear the scandal brewing like a summer storm. Inside the cramped office, Cat moved with the confidence of a woman who'd spent time in far rougher places than this. She examined the wanted posters on the wall with the practiced eye of someone who knew exactly what she was looking for. Her finger traced the outline of Samuel Blackwood's face, lingering on the artist's rendering of his cold, dead eyes. "You know him," Jack said. It wasn't a question. Cat turned to face him, and for the first time since riding into town, her mask slipped. Pain flickered across her features like lightning in a dark sky. "I knew him," she corrected. Past tense. "The man I knew died a long time ago, if he ever really existed at all." Jack poured 2 fingers of whiskey into tin cups and handed one to Cat. She took it without comment and drank it down in one smooth motion, not even flinching at the burn. He found himself both impressed and concerned by this revelation. Tell me, he said simply. Cat set the empty cup on his desk and walked to the window, looking out at the street where shadows were beginning to lengthen as afternoon gave way toward evening. Samuel Blackwood was my husband, she said, her voice so quiet Jack had to strain to hear it. We married 5 years ago in Boston. I was young and stupid and thought love could change a man. I learned the hard way that some men don't want to be changed. Jack felt something twist in his chest, an uncomfortable mixture of sympathy and something else he didn't want to examine too closely. What happened? He stole everything, Kat said, her reflection in the window glass showing eyes bright with unshed tears. My father's money, my mother's jewelry, even the silver candlesticks from our wedding. Then he vanished like smoke and wind, leaving me with nothing but debts and shame. My family disowned me. Said I'd brought disgrace on their name by marrying beneath my station. So you became a bounty hunter, Jack said, understanding dawning like sunrise. I became what I had to become, Kat replied, turning to face him. The vulnerability was gone now, replaced by steel and determination. I tracked down every man who ever rode with Samuel, collected every bounty, and learned every skill I needed to survive in this world. And now, after 3 years of hunting, I've finally caught his trail. He's here, Sheriff. In Dust Creek. I'd stake my life on it. Jack's hand instinctively moved to his gun. What makes you so sure? Kat reached into her pocket and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. She smoothed it on the desk, revealing a torn page from a ledger book. The writing was cramped and hurried, but legible. I took this from a man in Silver Ridge 2 weeks ago. He was one of Samuel's associates, said they were planning something big. Something that would set them up for life. The target is here. Jack studied the paper, his trained eye picking out details. Bank schedules, guard rotations, and at the bottom, a single word that made his blood run cold, Dust Creek. The bank, he said. They're going to rob the bank. Not just rob it, Kat said, her voice hard as granite. Tomorrow's Friday. That's when the mining payroll comes through. $50,000 in gold and currency, enough to make a gang of thieves disappear forever. Samuel's been planning this for months, and I intend to be there when he makes his move. Jack looked at this woman, this Catherine Lane who'd been broken and rebuilt herself into something dangerous and desperate. He saw the determination in her eyes, the set of her jaw, and he knew with absolute certainty that she would walk through hellfire to get to Samuel Blackwood. You can't do this alone, he said. I won't let you. Kat's laugh was bitter as burnt coffee. I don't remember asking for your help, Sheriff. Too bad, Jack replied, surprised by his own vehemence. This is my town, and I won't stand by while a gang of outlaws tears it apart. We do this together, or we don't do it at all. For a long moment, Kat studied him, her whiskey-colored eyes searching his face for something. Whatever she found there must have satisfied her, because she nodded slowly. Together, then. But when the shooting starts, Samuel Blackwood is mine. I've earned that right with blood and sweat in 3 years of my life. You understand? Jack extended his hand. I understand. Kat's hand was small in his, but her grip was firm and strong. As their palms touched, Jack felt something pass between them, a connection forged in the strange alchemy of shared purpose and mutual recognition. They were two damaged souls in a damaged world, but together they might just have a chance. We need a plan, Kat said, releasing his hand. Samuel's smart and he's ruthless. He won't hesitate to kill anyone who gets in his way. Then we'd better make sure we're not in his way, Jack replied. We'll be waiting for him instead. Dawn broke over Dust Creek like a promise or a threat, painting the sky in shades of red and gold that reminded Jack of blood and treasure. He stood on the porch of his office, watching the town wake up and go about its business, completely unaware of the danger lurking just beyond their sight. Shopkeepers opened their doors, the blacksmith's hammer began its rhythmic song, and the smell of fresh bread drifted from the bakery down the street. Kat emerged from the boarding house across the way, dressed now in a simple dark dress that made her look like any other respectable woman. But Jack could see the gun hidden beneath her shawl, and he knew that beneath the civilized veneer beat the heart of a hunter. She crossed the street with purposeful strides, her boots clicking against the wooden planks. Any sign of them? She asked, joining him on the porch. Nothing yet, Jack replied. But they'll come. Men like Blackwood can't resist a prize this big. They'd spent most of the previous evening formulating their plan. The bank sat at the corner of Main Street and Cedar Avenue, a sturdy brick building with 2 entrances and narrow windows designed to keep out both the heat and unwanted visitors. Jack had positioned his deputy, a young man named Tommy Reeves, inside the bank disguised as a customer. 2 more men he trusted, both veterans of the war between the states, were stationed in buildings across the street with rifles. Cat would be inside the bank when Blackwood and his gang made their move. Jack had argued against this, but she'd been immovable as a mountain. This was her fight, her revenge, and she wouldn't be denied the chance to face the man who destroyed her life. "Tell me about him," Jack said, surprising himself with the request. The real him, not the wanted poster version. Cat was quiet for so long that Jack thought she might not answer. Then she spoke, her voice carrying the weight of old memories. "He was charming," she said. "That's what made him so dangerous. When Samuel looked at you, really looked at you, it felt like you were the only person in the world that mattered. He could quote poetry and Shakespeare, play the piano like an angel, and make you believe that tomorrow would be better than today." "But it was all a lie," Jack said. "Not all of it," Cat corrected, and there was something infinitely sad in her voice. "That's what makes it worse. I think part of him really did care, in his own twisted way. But the darkness inside him was stronger than any good he might have had. The need to take, to control, to win at any cost, that was the real Samuel Blackwood. Everything else was just a mask he wore to get what he wanted." Jack found himself reaching out, his hand covering hers where it rested on the porch railing. "You deserve better than that," he said. "You deserved better than him." Cat looked down at their joined hands, and for a moment Jack thought she might pull away. Instead, she turned her palm up and laced her fingers through his. "Maybe," she said. "But we don't always get what we deserve in this life, Sheriff. We get what we fight for." The moment was broken by the sound of horses approaching from the east. Jack's hand dropped to his gun as he scanned the horizon, but it was only the stagecoach bringing the morning mail and a handful of passengers. Among them was a banker from Silver Ridge, come to oversee the transfer of the mining payroll. "It's time," Cat said, squeezing Jack's hand once before releasing it. "The money will be here within the hour. Blackwood won't wait long after that." "You don't have to do this," Jack said, knowing even as the words left his mouth that they were pointless. "We could set up the ambush differently, keep you out of harm's way." Cat smiled, and it was fierce and bright as a blade in sunlight. "I've been in harm's way for 3 years, Sheriff. This is just one more day." She reached up and touched his face, her fingers gentle against his rough cheek. "But I appreciate the concern. It's been a long time since anyone worried about me." Jack caught her wrist, holding her hand against his face for just a moment longer than necessary. "When this is over," he began, but she pressed her fingers to his lips, silencing him. "Don't," she said softly. "Don't make promises about after. Let's just focus on surviving today." She pulled away and walked toward the bank, her spine straight and her head held high. Jack watched her go, feeling something unfamiliar stirring in his chest. Fear, yes, but also hope. Hope that they might actually pull this off. Hope that when the smoke cleared and the dust settled, both of them might still be standing. The sun climbed higher, turning the street into a furnace. Jack took up his position in the doorway of the general store, where he had a clear view of both bank entrances. He checked his pistol for the 10th time, making sure every chamber was loaded, every mechanism working smoothly. Tommy gave him a subtle nod from inside the bank. The riflemen were in position on the rooftops. Everything was ready. Now came the hardest part, the waiting. Minutes crawled by like hours, each second stretching thin as wire. Jack's shirt stuck to his back with sweat, and his mouth felt dry as old leather. He thought about Cat inside that bank, alone and vulnerable despite her bravado. He thought about Samuel Blackwood, the charming monster who'd stolen her life and turned her into this hardened, desperate woman. Then, finally, they came. 4 riders, approaching from the west with the sun at their backs. They moved casually, unhurried, like men without a care in the world. But Jack could see the tension in their shoulders, the way their eyes constantly scanned the street. These were predators, and they'd come to Dust Creek to feed. The man in the lead was tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair and features that might have been handsome if not for the cruelty etched into every line. Even from a distance, Jack could feel the cold intelligence in his gaze. This was Samuel Blackwood, the man who'd broken Cat's heart and stolen her future. The man they were about to try to kill or capture. Jack's hand tightened on his gun. Whatever happened next would change everything. For Cat, for him, for Dust Creek itself. The storm was here, and there was no turning back now. The 4 riders dismounted in front of the bank with the practiced efficiency of men who'd done this dance before. Samuel Blackwood moved like a panther, all coiled grace and predatory awareness. His companions were rougher specimens, a scarred man with an eye patch, a heavy-set brute with hands like hemhocks, and a wiry youngster who couldn't have been more than 20, with nervous eyes that darted everywhere at once. Jack felt his heart hammering against his ribs as he watched them tie their horses to the hitching post. Every instinct screamed at him to draw his weapon, to end this before it began, but he held himself still. Timing was everything. They needed the gang inside the bank, contained, before they made their move. Otherwise innocent people would die in the crossfire. Blackwood paused at the door, his hand resting on the frame as he surveyed the street one final time. For a terrible moment, his gaze seemed to land directly on Jack's hiding spot, and Jack felt certain they'd been made. But then Blackwood smiled, a wolf smile full of confidence and contempt, and pushed through the door. His men followed, and Jack saw the youngster pull a bandana up over his face. Inside the bank, Kat felt the world narrow to a single point of crystalline focus. She stood at the counter, pretending to fill out a deposit slip, her hand steady despite the terror and rage coursing through her veins. 3 years. 3 years of hunting, of hardening herself, of becoming someone she barely recognized in the mirror. All of it had led to this moment. The door opened, and she didn't need to turn around to know who'd entered. She could feel Samuel's presence like a cold wind, the same magnetic pull that had drawn her to him all those years ago in Boston. But now she recognized it for what it truly was, not love or passion, but the gravitational force of a black hole that consumed everything it touched. "Nobody move," Samuel's voice rang out, smooth and cultured even as he drew his pistol. "This is a robbery, and if everyone stays calm and does exactly as they are told, nobody needs to die today." Kat slowly turned, her hand sliding beneath her shawl to grip the handle of her concealed revolver. Her eyes met Samuel's across the small space of the bank, and she watched recognition dawn on his handsome face. Shock, then calculation, then something that might have been genuine surprise flickered through his expression. "Hello, Samuel," she said, her voice carrying clearly in the sudden silence. "Did you miss me?" For perhaps the first time in his life, Samuel Blackwood appeared at a loss for words. His gun wavered, the muzzle dipping slightly as he stared at the woman he'd abandoned 3 years ago. "Catherine," he breathed. "What are you doing here?" "Finishing what you started," she replied, and pulled her gun. Everything happened at once. The scarred man lunged toward Kat, but Tommy Reeves rose from behind the teller's counter with a shotgun. The heavy-set brute fired wildly, his bullet punching through the ceiling and raining plaster dust down on everyone. The young outlaw panicked and ran for the door, only to meet Jack Morrison coming through it with his pistol drawn. Samuel's charm vanished like smoke, replaced by cold fury. He fired at Kat, but she'd already moved, dropping and rolling behind a desk as his bullet shattered the window behind where she'd been standing. She came up firing, her shot catching the scarred man in the shoulder and spinning him around like a top. Outside, the riflemen opened fire, their weapons barking from the rooftops. The heavy-set outlaw staggered back against the wall, blood blooming across his chest. He tried to raise his gun again, but Tommy's shotgun roared, and the man went down hard, not to rise again. Jack grappled with the young outlaw in the doorway, the two of them crashing through onto the street. The boy fought with desperate strength, his fists connecting with Jack's ribs and jaw. But Jack had 20 years of hard living on his side, and he brought his pistol down hard against the youngster's temple. The outlaw went limp, and Jack rolled off him, gasping for breath. Inside the bank, Kat and Samuel circled each other like duelists, their weapons raised. The scarred man lay groaning on the floor, clutching his wounded shoulder. Tommy kept his shotgun trained on him, but his eyes kept flicking nervously between Kat and Samuel. "You really think you can take me?" Samuel asked, and despite everything, that damnable charm tried to reassert itself. "Catherine, my love, we could work together. Split the money and disappear. Start over somewhere new. Isn't that what you always wanted?" "What I want," Kat said through gritted teeth, "is to see you hang for what you've done. To me, to all those other women you charmed and robbed and destroyed. You're not a man, Samuel. You're a plague." Samuel's face twisted with rage. "You stupid, naive little girl," he snarled, all pretense of civility gone. "You actually thought I loved you? You were a mark, nothing more. An easy target with a fat inheritance and stars in her eyes." "I know," Kat said, and there was steel in her voice. "I've known for a long time. But hearing you say it out loud makes this so much easier." She fired, but Samuel was already moving, throwing himself to the side with the reflexes of a man who'd survived countless gunfights. Her bullet caught him in the leg instead of the chest, and he went down hard, cursing. His gun skittered across the floor, spinning to a stop near the door. Kat advanced slowly, her weapon never wavering. Samuel dragged himself backward, leaving a trail of blood on the polished wood floor. For the first time, she saw fear in his eyes, genuine fear, and it was sweeter than any revenge she'd imagined. "Catherine, please," he gasped, pressing his hand against his wounded thigh. "Please, I'm sorry. For everything. Just let me go, let me leave, and you'll never see me again." Kat stood over him, looking down at the man who'd stolen her innocence and her faith in humanity. She thought about pulling the trigger, about ending him here and now. It would be so easy. So justified. The law would understand. Jack would understand. But as she looked at Samuel Blackwood bleeding on the floor, begging for his life, she realized something important. Killing him wouldn't give her back what she'd lost. It wouldn't heal the wounds or erase the scars. It would just make her into something she didn't want to be, another killer in a world that had too many already. "No," she said, lowering her gun. "You're going to stand trial. You're going to face every person you've hurt and hear them tell the world what you really are. Death would be too kind for you, Samuel. You're going to live with your shame." Jack appeared in the doorway, his face bruised but alive. He took in the scene with one sweeping glance and moved to secure Samuel with iron shackles. As he hauled the wounded outlaw to his feet, Kat finally allowed herself to breathe. It was over. After 3 years of hunting, it was finally over. The trial of Samuel Blackwood lasted 3 days and drew spectators from 5 territories. Newspapers sent reporters to chronicle every detail, and the courtroom in Silver Ridge was packed to capacity with victims, curiosity seekers, and people who simply wanted to witness justice being served. Kat sat in the front row through it all, her spine straight and her face impassive as woman after woman took the stand to tell stories that mirrored her own. Samuel had charmed them, seduced them, stolen from them, and disappeared. Some had been left with nothing. Others had lost far more. One woman's father had killed himself over the shame, another had spent 2 years in debtor's prison. The catalogue of destruction was staggering, and with each testimony, Kat felt a weight lifting from her shoulders. She wasn't alone. She'd never been alone. Samuel Blackwood had left a trail of broken lives across half the country. When the jury returned with their verdict after only 2 hours of deliberation, the word guilty rang through the courtroom like a bell. Samuel stood motionless as the judge sentenced him to 20 years of hard labor in the territorial prison. No charm, no smile, no clever words could save him now. He was led away in chains, and Kat felt something inside her finally, truly break, not break apart, but break open, like a seed splitting to allow new growth. Jack found her afterward standing outside the courthouse, watching the sun set over the mountains. He'd stayed by her side through the entire trial, a solid presence that asked for nothing and offered everything. Now he approached quietly, giving her space but letting her know he was there. "How do you feel?" he asked. Kat considered the question seriously. "Empty," she said finally. "But not in a bad way. Like I've been carrying something heavy for so long that I'd forgotten what it felt like to stand up straight. Does that make sense?" "Perfect sense," Jack replied. He pulled something from his pocket and held it out to her. "This came for you this morning." It was a telegram. Kat unfolded it with trembling hands and read the words that swam before her eyes. Her father, reaching out after 3 years of silence. He'd read about the trial in the newspapers. He was proud of her courage. The family wanted her to come home, if she'd consider forgiving them for turning their backs when she needed them most. "I don't know if I can," Kat whispered. "Go back to being that person, I mean. The girl I was in Boston. She died the day Samuel left." Jack stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him, solid and real in the fading light. "Maybe you don't have to be that girl," he said. "Maybe you can be the woman standing here right now. The one who tracked down a dangerous criminal, who stood up in court and told her truth, who chose justice over revenge. That woman seems pretty remarkable to me." Kat looked up at him, this weathered sheriff with kind eyes and a good heart. Over the past weeks, something had grown between them, something neither of them had been looking for but both had found anyway. It wasn't the wild passion she'd felt for Samuel, that destructive fire that consumed everything. This was different, quieter, steadier, like the warmth of a hearth fire on a cold night. "What happens now?" she asked. Jack smiled, the lines around his eyes crinkling in a way that made her heart do a strange little flip. "That depends. What do you want to happen?" Kat thought about Boston, about her family's mansion with its proper society and rigid rules. She thought about the life she'd lost and the life she'd built in its place. Then she thought about Dust Creek, about wide open spaces and second chances, about a man who looked at her and saw not a victim or a scandal, but a partner. "I want to stay," she said, and felt the rightness of the word settle into her bones. "If that's all right with you." Dust Creek could probably use someone who knows how to track criminals and isn't afraid to get their hands dirty. Are you offering to be my deputy? Jack asked, his smile widening. I'm offering to be whatever Dust Creek needs, Kat replied. And maybe, if you're interested, I could be something more. For you. Jack's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining naturally, as if they'd been doing this for years instead of weeks. I'd like that, he said softly. I'd like that very much. But Kat, I need you to be sure. I'm not a rich man, and I can't offer you the life you had in Boston. Good, Kat said, surprising them both with her vehemence. That life nearly destroyed me. I don't want wealth or status or any of the things I thought mattered. I want authenticity. I want purpose. I want to wake up every morning and know that what I'm doing matters, that I'm making a difference in the world, even if it's just a small corner of it. Then stay, Jack said. Help me keep Dust Creek safe. Help me build something good in this rough country. And let me spend whatever time you'll give me showing you that not all men are like Samuel Blackwood. Some of us know how to treasure what we're given. Kat felt tears prick her eyes, but for the first time in 3 years, they were tears of hope rather than pain. She rose on her toes and kissed him, a brief, sweet press of lips that tasted of new beginnings and second chances. When she pulled back, Jack was grinning like a fool, and she found herself grinning back. They rode back to Dust Creek together as the stars came out, painting the sky with silver light. The town was quiet when they arrived, peaceful in the way only small towns can be when the day's work is done and people are safe in their homes. Jack helped Kat down from her horse, his hands lingering on her waist just a moment longer than necessary. I telegraphed my father back, Kat said as they stood in the street outside the sheriff's office. Told him I appreciated his reaching out, but I've built a new life now. I'll visit when I can, but Dust Creek is my home. He understand? Jack asked. I think so, Kat replied. Or he will, eventually. He said he respects my choice, which is more than I expected. She looked around at the familiar buildings, the dust-covered street, the mountains rising in the distance. You know what's funny? 3 years ago, a place like this would have seemed like the end of the world to me. Now it feels like the beginning of everything. Jack pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her waist as she leaned back against his chest. Together they watched the night settle over their town, their sanctuary, their future. Welcome home, Deputy Lane, he murmured into her hair. Kat smiled, feeling something she'd thought lost forever blooming in her chest. It was peace, she realized. After years of running, of hunting, of living for revenge, she'd finally found peace. Not in justice, though that had been important. Not in forgiveness, though that might come with time. But in acceptance, of who she'd been, who she'd become, and who she might yet be. The next morning, she pinned on her deputy's badge and walked out onto the streets of Dust Creek with her head held high. The townspeople stared at first, scandalized by the idea of a woman in law enforcement. But Kat had faced down worse than gossip and disapproval. She'd survived betrayal, poverty, and 3 years of dangerous work. She'd tracked one of the West's most wanted criminals and brought him to justice. A few raised eyebrows weren't going to stop her now. And as the days turned to weeks and the weeks to months, the town came to respect her. She was fair but firm, compassionate but uncompromising, and she had a way of seeing through lies that made criminals think twice about causing trouble in Dust Creek. She and Jack made a formidable team, and more than that, they made each other happy in the quiet, everyday ways that mattered most. Sometimes, late at night, Kat would think about Samuel Blackwood rotting in his prison cell and feel nothing at all. Not satisfaction, not grief, just a distant acknowledgement of a chapter closed. He'd tried to break her, but instead he'd forged her into something stronger than she'd ever been. And now she stood in the life she'd built from the ashes of the old one, surrounded by purpose and possibility and a love that felt nothing like the destructive passion of her youth. It felt like home. It felt like redemption. It felt, finally, like enough.